While changing the tire of a stranger, the millionaire ended up finding the love of his life. This phrase could sound like one of those improbable stories that only exist in books or movies. But what happened that late afternoon on the side of the road showed that destiny has a surprising way of uniting paths that would never cross otherwise. The road was simple, lined with ancient trees that cast long shadows on the already worn asphalt, and the sun was slowly saying goodbye on the horizon, painting the sky with golden and orange tones. The millionaire, accustomed to luxury, grandiose commitments, and meetings filled with pomp, had decided to take a different path that day. He did not want drivers. He did not want security guards. He did not want anyone around him, just himself, his imported car, and the rare sensation of being alone, driving without a certain destination, breathing the freedom he had not felt for a long time. As he advanced along that secondary road, something caught his attention. The simple fields, the houses scattered in the distance, the tranquility that contrasted so much with the accelerated life of the big city. He allowed himself to smile alone, remembering that despite having achieved everything money could buy, he still felt within himself a void that was difficult to explain. It was as if a fundamental piece was missing in his life, something that could not be found at gala dinners, nor on trips around the world, nor in millionaire businesses. It was in this instant of reflection that he saw her. Ahead, parked on the shoulder, was a simple old car with the hood raised and a young woman apparently distressed, trying to understand what to do. The rear tire was completely flat, and beside her there was only a small purse, a cell phone without signal, and an expression of evident concern. She was alone, looking around like someone seeking help that was not coming. He slowed down, thought for a moment whether he should stop. After all, how many times had he passed through situations where people just looked but continued ahead without caring? But within him there was something different at that instant, an insistent voice that said he should not ignore that scene. Perhaps it was the emptiness he carried. Perhaps it was just empathy, or maybe it was destiny itself opening a door. He stopped the car a little ahead, got out calmly, and approached. He wore simple clothes by his standards, a clear, well-pressed shirt, light dress pants, and an expensive watch that in that context contrasted with the simplicity of the scene. The young woman raised her eyes, startled, but soon her expression changed to an almost immediate relief upon seeing that someone had actually stopped. "Do you need help?" he asked with a gentle tone, without exhibiting any arrogance, just sincere concern. She smiled awkwardly, almost embarrassed, and replied, "The tire blew out and I have no idea how to change it. I already tried to call someone, but there is no signal here." He approached the car, quickly analyzed the situation, and without thinking twice, rolled up his sleeves. "Do not worry, I will solve this in a few minutes." While he crouched down to loosen the bolts, she watched him attentively. There was something strange about that scene. That man, clearly someone of position, was there on the side of the road, kneeling on the dirt ground, dirtying his hands to help her, without asking for anything in return. She tried to make conversation to break the silence. "You do not seem like someone accustomed to changing tires," she said, laughing lightly. He raised his eyes and smiled back. "Maybe I do not seem like it, but I have done this a few times. Believe me, it is not so complicated." The conversation continued lightly, and each word exchanged seemed to bring them closer in an unexpected way. She told him she was coming back from work, that she lived in a small town not very far from there, and that that car was her only means of transportation. He, in turn, did not go into details about who he really was. He did not mention companies, mansions, or figures. At that moment, he did not want to be seen as a millionaire, just as a man willing to help. When he finished changing the tire, he stood up, discreetly cleaned his hands with a handkerchief he had in his pocket, and said, "There, it is solved. You can continue your trip safely." She looked at him with genuine gratitude, her eyes shining as she realized that there were still people willing to extend a hand without expecting anything in return. "I do not know how to thank you," she said with a soft voice. He took a deep breath and, without being able to avoid it, let slip a comment loaded with sincerity. "You do not need to thank me. Sometimes helping someone is all we need to feel alive." For a moment, time seemed to stop. His eyes met hers, and there was something there that neither of them knew how to explain immediately. It was not just gratitude, it was not just sympathy. It was a silent, intense, and unexpected connection. He, accustomed to interested looks, realized that there was sincerity in her gaze, and she, accustomed to disappointments and empty promises, saw in him a rare security, a real care. Before leaving, she made a point of asking his name, and he answered simply, without titles, without pompous surnames, just his first name, as if he wanted her to hear it like any other man. She smiled again, got in the car, and thanked him once more, waving as she drove away down the road. He remained there for a few seconds, watching her car disappear in the distance, and deep in his heart, something told him that this would not be the last meeting between the two. He did not know how, he did not know when, but he felt that destiny still reserved much more than a simple changed tire. And so, on that apparently ordinary late afternoon, a millionaire found something he had never experienced in his entire life of luxury. The real feeling that he had met someone capable of filling the emptiness that money never filled. That night, the millionaire returned home with a strange feeling he could not explain. He was accustomed to having intense days, endless meetings, social commitments in luxurious halls, but none of this filled him as much as the few minutes spent beside that unknown young woman on the side of the road. While he drove back to his imposing mansion, he thought about the brightness of her eyes, the shy smile, and the sincere way she had thanked him. It was something rare in his life, something he did not find in the environments he usually frequented, where everything seemed like a dispute of interests. Arriving home, he was received by the employees, but he did not even pay attention. He went straight up to his room and, lying in his wide and comfortable bed, stayed looking at the ceiling for long minutes. He wondered who that woman was, how she lived, what her dreams were. He wanted to know more, but at the same time feared it was just a passing coincidence, something that destiny brought to provoke and then took away. The following days were taken by commitments, but in all of them there was one detail in common: the memory of that afternoon. Not even billionaire meetings or luxurious lunches with investors could erase from his mind the image of the young woman beside the car, holding her purse and smiling gratefully. Every night before sleeping, he caught himself imagining how it would be to see her again, if he would have the courage to search, if destiny would give him this chance again. And destiny, in fact, did not take long to act. Within a week, he decided to go out again by car, alone, without security guards, without drivers, just to revisit that road where everything had happened. He did not know exactly what he expected to find, but something inside him propelled him to go. It was then that, passing through a small nearby town, he recognized a familiar figure. There she was, at the door of a simple bakery, holding some bags and talking to an older lady. His heart accelerated in a way he did not remember feeling for years. He pulled over the car, discreetly, got out, and walked to the sidewalk. She took a few seconds to recognize him, but when their eyes met, the same brightness appeared again, as if it were confirmation that this reunion was not just the work of chance. "You again?" she said, laughing surprised. "I thought I would never see you again." He smiled a little awkwardly, but happy to be there. "I think destiny does not like quick goodbyes." They both laughed and began to talk. She told him she worked in a small store in town, helped her family, and led a simple life, marked by effort and honesty. He, once again, did not reveal who he really was. He did not want to scare her with figures or titles. He wanted to be just an ordinary man, someone willing to listen, to be present. The conversation, which started casually, extended. He offered to help her carry the bags, and the two walked together through the narrow and quiet streets of the town. With each step, they seemed to discover more about each other. She spoke of her dreams, of how she would like to study more, of how she believed that life could change with effort and faith. He listened attentively, enchanted by the sincere and true way she saw the world, so different from the superficiality he knew. When they arrived at the door of her house, he hesitated. He did not want to leave, but he also did not want to seem invasive. It was then that she, with a spontaneous gesture, said, "If you want, you can come in and have some coffee. It is nothing luxurious, but it is from the heart." He accepted without thinking twice. He sat at the simple table in the kitchen, smelled the fresh coffee being passed in the cloth strainer. He saw the details of her home, old furniture, framed photographs, memories of a life built with simplicity, but full of love. It was all so different from what he was accustomed to, that for an instant he forgot completely who he was and all the weight he carried in his life as a millionaire. They talked for hours, laughed, shared stories, exchanged glances that said much more than words could express. He realized that for the first time in a long time, he was being heard without judgments, without interest, without expectations beyond the company. She, in turn, felt that there was something different about him, something she still did not know how to identify, but that made her feel safe, special. When night fell, he said goodbye, but not without first promising he would return. And this time it would not be just a coincidence. While driving back to his mansion, his heartbeat accelerated, taken by a certainty he had never had until then. That woman had awakened in him something that all the money in the world had not been able to buy. And that night, lying down again in his luxurious bed, he did not think about business. He did not think about commitments. He did not think about figures. He thought only of her smile, of the coffee served with affection, of the simplicity of a life that seemed so distant from his, but that now became what he most desired. The days that followed were different from everything he was accustomed to. In his office, surrounded by reports, graphs, and screens full of numbers, his mind no longer clung so much to the figures. Meetings seemed emptier, conversations about business less relevant. For the first time he realized that his life, although surrounded by comfort, was also lonely. What filled his thoughts at every instant was the memory of that simple afternoon in that modest house, where he had drunk a coffee that seemed more valuable to him than any millionaire banquet. He tried to stay focused, but even the close employees noticed that something in him had changed. The man, previously rigid and concentrated, now, from time to time, got lost in daydreams, looked out the window as if seeking something that was not there. One of his advisors even asked if he was well, and he just smiled without giving further explanations. After all, how to explain that an unknown young woman had shaken so much the heart of someone who had never allowed himself to feel? At the end of the week, he could not take it anymore. He dressed simply, without expensive suits, without the watch that cost a fortune, without any symbol of wealth. He took his car, not the most flashy imported one, but a more discreet vehicle, and returned to that small town. On the way, anxiety consumed him. Would she be at home? Would she remember him with the same affection? Would destiny allow this story to continue? When he arrived, he parked near the central square. He observed the peaceful life happening. Children running after balls, gentlemen talking on wooden benches, ladies leaving the church with tranquil countenances. It was a world completely different from what he knew, but one that brought him an inexplicable peace. And then he saw her again. She was leaving the store where she worked with a simple apron, holding some boxes. The afternoon sun illuminated her hair, and for an instant, he was paralyzed, just admiring the scene. It was as if time had stopped. Gathering courage, he approached with a discreet smile. "Do you need help?" he asked, extending his hands to hold the boxes. She raised her gaze and, upon recognizing him, opened a spontaneous smile. "You again? You are turning it into a habit to appear around here." He laughed somewhat awkwardly. "Maybe it is a habit I do not want to lose." She blushed slightly but accepted the help. They walked together to the inside of the store where he accompanied her at work. While they organized the merchandise, they talked. He wanted to know everything about her, her routine, her dreams, her childhood in that town, and the more she spoke, the more he was enchanted. She, in turn, found it curious that this man appeared out of nowhere in her life. He did not speak much about himself, just said he had businesses in other cities and that he liked to travel to get to know new places. There was an air of mystery about him, but also a sincere kindness that made her feel comfortable. At the end of the shift, he invited her to take a walk around the square. They walked slowly, talking about simple things. He spoke of his childhood, omitted details of wealth, but told of the memories of playing in the streets, of the stories he heard from his grandfather, of the lessons he learned early about respect and gratitude. She spoke of how she dreamed of studying, maybe opening a small business one day, helping her family more. As they walked, their gazes met, and both realized that something special was being born there. It was not just sympathy, nor just friendship. There was a bond, a connection that grew naturally. When the sky began to darken and the first stars appeared, they sat on a bench in the square. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. On the contrary, it seemed that even the silence spoke. He then took a deep breath and said, "You have no idea how special that day was when we met on the road. Sometimes I think it was chance, but maybe it was not just that. Maybe I was meant to find you." She looked at him surprised, with her heart accelerated. She did not know how to respond, but that sincere look left her speechless. She just smiled, and that simple gesture was enough for him to feel he was on the right path. That night, he took her to the door of her house again. The farewell was loaded with the desire to stay, but there was also a deep respect. He did not want to rush anything, did not want to break the delicacy of the moment, just said he would return. And she, with the same shy smile, replied that she would be waiting. Returning to his mansion, he felt different. It was not just the memory of a pleasant meeting, it was a certainty growing inside him. That simple woman was changing his life, showing a new meaning to his days. And for the first time in a long time, the millionaire did not think about business, profits, or investments. He thought only of her. The following days were of pure expectation for Eduardo. The billionaire, accustomed to commanding international meetings, signing contracts of unimaginable values, and dealing with pressures that would make many give up, now found himself nervous like a teenager about to meet someone for the second time. It was strange for him to feel his heart accelerate for something as simple as a walk in a small town. But at the same time, it was the most alive sensation he had experienced in years. In the office of his mansion, the employees noticed him restless. The security guards, who were accustomed to seeing him follow rigid routines, were surprised when suddenly he cancelled commitments or left alone in his common car, that same one that did not call attention. He did not want drivers, he did not want luxury, he did not want anything that would denounce who he really was. All he wanted was to be closer to Laura, that young woman who had entered his life in an unexpected and silent way, but who now occupied his thoughts at every instant. In the small town, Laura's routine continued. She worked in the grocery store, helped her mother at home, took care of her younger sister, and whenever possible allowed herself to dream. The meeting with Eduardo had awakened something in her, a different brightness, a desire to believe that perhaps life could bring her something beyond the daily struggle, but at the same time she kept her feet on the ground. After all, he was still a stranger, someone who had appeared suddenly in her life, who he really was, why he always came back. On a Saturday morning, Eduardo decided to go again to the town. This time he brought flowers, but not those very expensive flowers from renowned florists. He bought a simple bouquet of daisies picked in the region itself. He wanted it to be something sincere, something that matched her. When he arrived at the grocery store, he found Laura serving customers. Her smile lit up when she saw him, but she tried to hide it in front of the other people. "You came back," she said when she got a few free minutes. "I said I would come back," he replied, handing her the bouquet. "I do not know if you like them, but I thought they matched you." She received the flowers with emotion. The simple gesture touched her deeply. It was not common for someone to remember her like this with so much care. "They are beautiful." "Thank you," she said with her eyes shining. That afternoon after work, Laura accepted again to take a walk with Eduardo. They went to a small lake near the town, a place where the residents used to go to rest. There they sat by the water, watching the reflection of the sun on the liquid mirror while they talked. Eduardo listened to her as if each word were a treasure. And the more she spoke, the more he realized that there was nothing in the world more precious than that simplicity. But inside him there was a conflict. He knew he was hiding an enormous part of his life. He was not just a man who had businesses in other cities, as he had said. He was the owner of companies, a shareholder in corporations, a figure known in circles that Laura could not even imagine, and this secret bothered him. He feared that, upon revealing the truth, she would distance herself, thinking she had been deceived. At the same time, he did not want to lose the charm of the normality he shared with her. Laura, in turn, also felt curiosity growing. He was different from the men in the region. His manners, his gaze, even the way he spoke, denounced that there was something more. She did not dare to ask directly, but in her innermost self she questioned who Eduardo really was. At the end of that afternoon, as they walked back, he gathered courage to say something. "Laura, I need you to know that I am not exactly who you think I am." She stopped, looking at him with some apprehension. "What do you mean?" Eduardo hesitated. The truth was on the tip of his tongue, but fear held him back. Finally, he smiled nervously. "I mean that I do not live here. I come from very far away. My life is very different from yours. Sometimes I'm afraid that this is a problem." She frowned thoughtfully but responded calmly. "Eduardo, everyone has a different life. What matters is who you really are, not what you have or where you came from." Those words touched him deeply. It was as if she had seen beyond appearances, beyond the secret he carried. He did not reveal everything at that moment, but decided that soon he would be honest. In the following days, the bond between the two intensified. Eduardo began to visit the town more frequently, always discreetly. He helped with small tasks, carried boxes, arranged shelves, accompanied Laura on walks at dusk. They began to laugh together at simple things, to share confidences, to build an intimacy that grew in silence. But not everything was easy. Some people in the town began to find that foreigner who appeared so frequently strange. Whispers began to arise. Who could he be? What is he doing here? Could he be hiding something? Sharp tongues commented, and Laura, even trying not to give it importance, felt uncomfortable. One night, talking under the starry sky, she decided to ask, "Eduardo, why do you come here so much? What are you really looking for?" He looked at her deeply, as if seeking courage within her to open up. "I come because I found something here that I do not have anywhere else. I found you." The silence took over for a few instants, and Laura, moved, did not know what to say. But that sincere look, that tone of voice loaded with truth, made her heart accelerate. Eduardo knew he still needed to reveal who he really was. He knew that sooner or later this would have to happen. But for now, he preferred to live that moment, that beginning of pure love without interference. Because for the first time in a long time, he was not the millionaire surrounded by luxury and power. He was just a man in love, sitting beside the woman who was beginning to give meaning to his life. And that night, when they said goodbye, the hug was longer, more intense. There were not enough words to express, but both knew. Something strong was growing between them, something that neither time, nor distance, nor differences could erase. The days transformed into weeks, and Eduardo could no longer imagine his life without those constant trips to the small town. The simple act of walking through the cobblestone streets, greeting the residents who were beginning to know him, hearing Laura's laughter echoing amid the routine of the grocery store, was something that filled him more than any figure he could add to his bank accounts. He felt he was discovering a new version of himself, a version that did not depend on luxury, power, or the impeccable image he had always cultivated in his life as a millionaire. But at the same time, the tension within him grew. The secret of his identity was still kept, and the more time passed, the heavier it became. It was as if with each look that Laura cast at him, full of trust and surrender, the weight of the omission became unbearable. He wanted to open his heart, tell everything, reveal that he was not just a man passing through, but someone whose name had already been printed in magazines, whose companies were known even outside the country. But fear still held him back, fear of ruining everything, of her feeling she had been deceived, of that purity he loved so much breaking into 1,000 pieces. Meanwhile, in the town, comments about him intensified. The most curious neighbors whispered among themselves, "That man does not seem from here, always so well dressed, so educated. Could he be running from something?" Others said, "Maybe he has a secret life. No one appears so much without reason." And of course, some with malice insinuated he must be after Laura, but does she know who he really is? Laura heard part of these comments, and although she tried to ignore them, the words were leaving marks on her heart. One night, while closing the grocery store, she decided to touch on the subject. Eduardo was there, helping her organize some boxes of products. "Eduardo," she began, hesitant, "I wanted to ask you something." He looked at her attentively, noticing the seriousness in her tone. "Of course, you can ask. Who are you really?" she said directly. "I am not saying this with ill will, but sometimes I feel that you are hiding something. You appear, disappear, come back, always have a different air. I feel there is something I do not know." The question fell on him like an inevitable weight. Eduardo took a deep breath, leaning on the box he was holding. It was the moment he feared, the moment he knew would come. But looking into her eyes, full of sincerity and a mixture of fear and hope, he hesitated. "Laura," I began, but his voice failed. "It is not easy to explain. I have a complicated life, a life I do not want to interfere with what we are building." She frowned, hurt. "I do not want you to protect me from anything, Eduardo. If we are going to have anything real, there needs to be sincerity." Her words echoed deep in his mind. He knew she was right, but fear still paralyzed him. So, instead of revealing the whole truth, he said only, "I promise I will tell you everything, but please give me some time." Laura nodded, but deep down she felt a tightness in her heart. There was something big behind that delay, and she did not know if she was prepared to deal with it. In the following days, her behavior changed. She still smiled, still accepted his invitations, but there was a certain distancing, as if she were protecting her heart. Eduardo noticed and suffered with it. The man who was applauded for advice in meetings, capable of making millionaire decisions in minutes, now found himself lost before the silence of a simple woman. One day, determined to break the barrier, Eduardo prepared a surprise. He called Laura to go out but did not say where. He took her to a flowery field on the outskirts of the town, a place where the horizon met the sunset in golden and orange tones. There he set up a simple picnic with fruits, breads, cheese, and juice. Nothing of expensive wines, nothing of refined dishes, just simplicity. "Why all this?" she asked, surprised. "Because I want you to know that when I am with you, I do not need anything beyond the basics." He smiled, looking into her eyes. "I do not know how you did it, Laura, but you make me want to be a different man." She looked at him in silence for a few instants and then let herself relax. The hardness she had been keeping broke a little. Smiling, she replied, "I do not know what life has prepared, Eduardo, but I know that when I am with you, I feel a peace I do not feel anywhere." The moment was magical. They laughed, shared stories, watched the sky change color until night fell. And under that mantle of stars, the first kiss happened. It was not an impetuous or hurried kiss, but rather a slow kiss, loaded with feeling, as if both knew that something much greater was beginning there. However, real life did not take long to impose itself. The comments from the town did not stop and began to reach the ears of Laura's mother, who called her to talk. "My daughter, who is this man? What does he want from you?" the mother asked, worried. "He is not from here. No one knows anything about him. I do not want to see you suffer." Laura tried to defend Eduardo, saying he was a good, kind, and true man. But deep down, the mother's question echoed along with the one she herself had already asked. Who, after all, was he? On the other side, Eduardo received calls from his business partners, questioning his absences. He was leaving aside important commitments, and this was beginning to generate tensions. Some said he was too distracted. Others insinuated that there was something or someone changing his priorities. Between two worlds, Eduardo felt that soon he would have to make a decision: continue hiding his identity, running the risk of losing Laura due to lack of sincerity, or open up completely about his life, exposing himself to her and perhaps even to the entire town. And while he thought about this, a new idea began to emerge in his mind. Maybe it was time to face the fear and let Laura know who he really was. Because deep down, if she really was the woman he believed, nothing could drive them apart. Eduardo woke up that morning with a different weight in his chest. The millionaire who for years had lived controlling every detail of his life, who had learned since early to hide emotions behind firm and secure expressions, now found himself dominated by something he could no longer postpone: the need to be truthful. He knew that Laura already felt the distance in his evasive answers. He knew that the rumors of the town surrounded her. He knew that his silence was transforming into an increasingly high wall between the two. And as much as he feared her reaction, as much as he feared losing what they were building, he understood that there was only one way: to open his heart and tell the truth. While he got ready, looking at himself in the mirror, he thought about how everything seemed like a paradox. There he was, a man accustomed to making millionaire decisions without blinking, capable of negotiating contracts in different languages and facing fierce competitors without fear. And yet, he felt vulnerable as never before, a simple woman from a small town. His biggest negotiation now did not involve figures, but trust. And this was the most delicate transaction of his life. On the way to the town, his mind was a whirlwind. He remembered the first meeting, her shy smile, the way she held the flowers he had given her, the sincerity in her eyes when she said it did not matter where he came from, but who he was. Maybe I am underestimating her, he thought. Maybe she is stronger than I imagine. Maybe she will understand. Meanwhile, Laura lived days of anguish. Her heart was divided between the trust she felt for Eduardo and the doubts that each day grew more. The neighbors talked, her mother was suspicious, and even her younger sister asked her curiously, "Who is he really, Laura? Does he really like you, or is he going to leave suddenly?" These questions echoed in her mind, and even if she tried to push them away, they were like shadows that pursued her. That afternoon, Eduardo decided to call her to walk to the top of a nearby hill, from where it was possible to see the entire small town spread out among the fields. The sunset painted the sky with golden and orange tones, creating the perfect setting for something so important. Laura accepted the invitation, but in her gaze there was a certain caution, as if she already expected that moment to be decisive. They walked in silence for a few minutes, just hearing the sound of the wind and the distant singing of birds. When they reached the top, Eduardo took a deep breath, trying to gather strength. "Laura," he began with a slightly trembling voice, "there is something I need to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago, but fear did not let me." She looked at him seriously, waiting. Eduardo continued, "I am not just an ordinary man who passes through here from time to time. Actually, my life is complicated. I am the owner of companies, shareholder of big businesses, involved in a world that has nothing to do with this place." Laura widened her eyes, surprised. She remained silent for a few instants, trying to absorb what she had heard. Eduardo continued anxiously, "I did not want to hide to deceive you. I just needed to live with you without the weight of my name, without the judgment that always accompanies me. I wanted you to see me as a simple man, not as someone with money or fame." She took a deep breath, moving away a few steps. His words hit her like a whirlwind. Millionaire, owner of companies. It was too much information. Her heartbeat accelerated, not with dazzle, but with fear. "So everything you showed me until now was a lie?" she asked with a choked voice. "No, Laura," he hurried to respond. "Everything I said, everything I felt, each word was true. What I hid was who I am in the world out there. But here before you, I have never been as sincere in my entire life." Laura looked away, trying to contain her tears. It was not easy to deal with that. The simplicity of her life contrasted too much with the revelation she had just received. She thought of her mother, of her sister, of the daily difficulties, and now found herself before a man who seemed to come from another planet. "Do you have any idea what this means?" she said with a choked voice. "We are from completely different worlds. How could this work?" Eduardo approached, gently took her hands and said firmly, "I know we are different, but I do not care how much. I am not here for what separates us, but for what unites us. Laura, I did not fall in love with your town, your grocery store, or your routine. I fell in love with you." The tears finally ran down her face. Laura's heart was divided. On one hand, she felt the pain of the revelation, the insecurity of everything that could come from there. On the other, she saw in his eyes a sincerity impossible to ignore. The silence was broken only by the sound of the wind on that hill. Laura took a deep breath and said, "I need time, Eduardo. I need to think." He nodded, respecting her decision, although his heart ached at those words. That night, Laura cried silently in her room. They were not tears of anger, but of confusion. The man she was learning to love was not who she imagined, but at the same time she could not forget the simple gestures, the true smile, the way he made her feel special. Eduardo, in turn, spent hours awake. He knew he could lose Laura, but he was willing to fight. For the first time in his life, something was more important than contracts, business, or figures. For the first time, he wanted to conquer someone, not for what he possessed, but for what he was. And deep down, both he and she knew that this story was only just beginning. True love, when born, faces winds, storms, and doubts. But if it were real, it would resist everything. The days that followed were the longest of Laura's life. After Eduardo's revelation, her heart seemed to live between two extremes. On one side, the memory of each gesture of affection, each sweet word, each smile he had offered her in such a sincere way. On the other, the shocking reality that this man was not a simple traveler who had appeared by chance in her town, but a millionaire accustomed to a life completely different from hers. In the small grocery store, while she arranged shelves and served customers, her mind was far away. When the neighbors made comments, some with malicious curiosity, others with disguised envy, Laura just responded with a tired smile. But inside her the questions did not cease. Can I trust him? Does he really love me for what I am? Or will he one day get tired of the simplicity of my life and return to his world of luxury? Eduardo, in turn, did not give up. Each day he sought a way to show that his words were true. He did not pressure her, did not demand immediate answers, just remained present, appearing in the town, helping with small tasks, showing with actions what words alone could not sustain. An example of this happened on a Sunday morning. The grocery store was full, and Laura's mother, overloaded, tried to organize everything. Eduardo appeared without warning, and without thinking twice, rolled up the sleeves of the expensive shirt he wore and began to carry boxes, serve customers, and even help an elderly lady find what she needed. That scene caught everyone's attention. The sharp tongues, which before hurried to spread rumors, now remained silent before a man who, despite his elegant and educated posture, did not hesitate to mix with the hard work of the simple people of the town. Laura watched from a distance, with a tight heart. It was impossible to deny that Eduardo really made an effort. And little by little this constancy was breaking the barriers she herself had erected. A few weeks later, during a quiet afternoon, Eduardo invited Laura for a walk to the lake, where they had already been before. The sun reflected on the calm waters, creating an almost magical atmosphere. They sat side by side, and for a few instants silence reigned, only filled by the sound of nature around them. "Laura," he said with a low but firm voice, "I see that you still have doubts. I know that my revelation was not easy to digest, but I need you to believe in one thing. All the money I have, all the power I conquered, do not mean anything compared to what I feel when I am with you." She sighed, looking at the reflection of light on the lake. "It is difficult, Eduardo. The difference between our worlds is too big. Sometimes I think there is no way for this to work." He held her hands delicately and responded, "Maybe our worlds are different, but our hearts do not need to be. Love does not see wealth or poverty, only truth. And my truth is that I cannot imagine my life without you." The tears ran silently down Laura's face, but this time they were not of doubt, but of emotion. She looked into his eyes and at that instant saw something she could no longer deny. Eduardo was not there on a whim, nor for distraction, but because he really loved her. "I believe in you," she said finally, "and I want to try. I want to take the risk, even if it is difficult." Eduardo's heart filled with joy, and he hugged her with all the strength of someone who finally saw the wall crumble. The news that they were together began to spread through the town, and as expected, the comments did not stop. Some turned up their noses, saying that this could not last, that he would certainly leave one day. Others, more hopeful, saw in the relationship proof that true love could arise anywhere. But regardless of opinions, Laura and Eduardo learned to ignore external voices. What mattered was what they felt for each other. Time passed, and Eduardo began to divide his life between business and the small town. Little by little, even the most suspicious residents realized that his presence was not temporary. He invested in the community, discreetly helped improve the local school, bought products at Laura's family grocery store, without ever flaunting his condition. He became, in a certain way, part of that place. And then, on a special night, Eduardo prepared something that would change their lives forever. He invited Laura to return to the hill, where he had revealed his true identity. This time, the setting was decorated with small lights and candles, creating a romantic and welcoming environment. Laura, surprised, could hardly believe what she saw. When they reached the top, Eduardo knelt before her, taking a small box from his pocket. It was not an exaggerated ring, studded with luxurious stones that would dazzle. It was a simple ring, but of extremely good taste, made with care to reflect who they were together, different but complementary. "Laura," he said with watery eyes, "since the day I stopped to help you on the road, my life was never the same. You showed me the value of simplicity, of sincerity, of love that cannot be bought. I do not know what the future holds for us, but I know I want to face it by your side. Will you marry me?" Laura brought her hands to her face, moved. The tears ran without her being able to contain them. She looked at that man who had transformed her life in such an unexpected way, and with a heart overflowing with love, she replied, "Yes, Eduardo, I accept." The applause of the wind and the brightness of the stars seemed to witness that magical moment. They hugged, kissed, and sealed not just a commitment, but a promise of eternal love. A few months later, the small town was the stage for a wedding that no one would ever forget. There was no excessive ostentation, but an authentic celebration, where friends, neighbors, and relatives united to celebrate the love that was born from an unlikely meeting. Eduardo and Laura said yes before everyone, proving that when two hearts meet, there is no difference of worlds that separates them. And so, the millionaire, who one day stopped to change the tire of a stranger, found not just gratitude, but the greatest treasure of his life, true love. And together they lived happily, building a story marked not by material wealth, but by the richness of the feeling that united them. The wedding was simple but full of meaning. The small church in the town was decorated with the same daisies Eduardo had given Laura on one of their first meetings. The benches were filled with people who, over the months, had learned to respect and admire that love that had overcome so many barriers. Laura's mother, who at first was suspicious, now cried with emotion seeing her daughter dressed in a simple but elegant white dress, radiant with happiness. Eduardo's business partners, some who had traveled to witness the ceremony, were surprised by the simplicity and authenticity of everything. Many of them, accustomed to luxurious weddings in grand halls, realized that there was something special in that celebration. It was not about money or ostentation, but about something much more valuable, genuine love, and the union of two souls that had found each other against all odds. When the priest asked if Eduardo took Laura as his wife, he responded with a firm and emotional voice. "I do. And I promise to love you, respect you, and be by your side in all moments, whether in joy or in difficulties." When it was Laura's turn, she looked into Eduardo's eyes and said with tears running down her face, "I do. And I promise to trust you, to support you, and to build together with you a life full of love and truth." The exchange of rings was the most emotional moment. Eduardo placed the ring on Laura's finger with such care, as if he were holding the most precious treasure in the world. And in fact, for him, she was. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the entire church erupted in applause. It was a moment of pure joy, of celebration of love that had triumphed. The reception was held in the town square, under the starry sky. Simple tables were set up, decorated with white flowers and candles. The food was prepared by the residents themselves, each contributing with a dish, transforming the celebration into something truly collective. There was music, dancing, laughter, and many stories shared. Eduardo, who at first seemed so different, now danced among the people, laughed with the children, conversed with the elders, as if he had always been part of that community. Laura watched everything with a heart full of gratitude. She had feared that the differences between their worlds would be insurmountable, but there was Eduardo, integrated, happy, truly present. During the party, Eduardo's best friend, who had traveled from the city, asked to give a speech. He spoke of how impressed he was to see the transformation in Eduardo. He said that he had known him for many years, had seen him build an empire, conquer markets, but had never seen him as happy as he was now. He concluded by saying, "Sometimes we think happiness is in the things we accumulate, in the goals we achieve, in the recognition we receive. But Eduardo showed me that true happiness is in finding someone who sees us for who we really are, not for what we have. Laura, you changed his life. And by doing so, you also taught all of us a valuable lesson." The words touched everyone present. Even those who had been most skeptical about that relationship now understood that what united Eduardo and Laura was something rare and precious. As the night progressed and the stars shone bright in the sky, Eduardo and Laura sat for a moment away from the crowd. They looked at the party happening around them, at the people who had become part of their story. Eduardo held Laura's hand and said, "Do you know what the best part of all this is? It is that I found in you not just a wife, but a home. A place where I can be myself, without masks, without pretenses." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And I found in you someone who taught me that love can overcome any barrier, any difference. Someone who showed me that I deserve to be loved exactly as I am." They remained there, in silence, just enjoying each other's company, knowing that they had ahead of them a life together, full of challenges, certainly, but also full of love, respect, and complicity. The months that followed the wedding were of adaptation and learning. Eduardo, who was used to living in his mansion in the city, decided to divide his time. He kept a small apartment in the capital for when he needed to attend important meetings, but his true home became the simple house he bought in the town, close to Laura's family. It was a cozy house, with a small garden that Laura loved to take care of. There were no luxurious chandeliers, no imported furniture, no symbols of ostentation. It was just a warm space, filled with love and laughter. Eduardo discovered the pleasure of simple things. Waking up and having breakfast with Laura, helping her in the small grocery store that they decided to expand together, walking through the town greeting the neighbors, playing with the children in the square. These were moments that filled his heart in a way that no business meeting ever could. Of course, not everything was easy. Sometimes Eduardo needed to travel for business, and those separations, even brief, were difficult for both. But they learned to deal with it, keeping constant communication, counting the days until they could be together again. Laura, for her part, also faced challenges. Sometimes she felt insecure, thinking that maybe one day Eduardo would miss the sophisticated life he had in the city. But he was always attentive, always finding ways to reassure her, to show her that she was all he needed. One day, Eduardo had an idea. He decided to create a program to help young entrepreneurs in the region. He used part of his fortune to set up a fund that offered interest-free loans and mentoring for people who wanted to start their own businesses. It was his way of giving back to the community that had welcomed him so warmly. Laura was proud of his initiative. She saw in that gesture the confirmation that Eduardo had truly changed, that he was using his resources not just for his own benefit, but to make a difference in the lives of others. Years passed, and the love between Eduardo and Laura only grew stronger. They faced difficulties, as any couple does, but they always found a way to overcome them together. They learned that true love is not just about passion and romance, but also about partnership, understanding, and commitment. One day, while they were sitting on the porch of their house watching the sunset, Eduardo looked at Laura and said, "Do you remember the day I stopped to change your tire?" She smiled, nodding. "How could I forget? It was the day my life changed forever." He held her hand and said, "That day, I thought I was just helping a stranger. I had no idea I was meeting the love of my life, the person who would give meaning to everything I had conquered." Laura, with tears in her eyes, replied, "And I thought it was just a kind man helping someone in need. I had no idea that this man would become my husband, my partner, my everything." They stayed there, hand in hand, grateful for the destiny that had crossed their paths. The story of Eduardo and Laura became known throughout the region. People spoke with admiration of the millionaire who had given up ostentation for true love, of the simple woman who had captured the heart of a powerful man. But for them, none of that mattered. What mattered was the love they shared, the life they had built together, the family they had formed. And so, many years later, when they looked back, they could say with certainty that the best decision they had ever made was to believe in love, to overcome fears and prejudices, to fight for what they felt. Because in the end, they discovered that true wealth is not measured in money or possessions, but in the love we share, in the bonds we create, in the moments we live with the people we love. And that is the greatest treasure anyone can have. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment here. Tell me where you are watching from. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like, as it helps the channel a lot to bring more stories like this one. Until next time.